Welcome back to another episode of the Final Frontier podcast. Bill and I decided to take the week off, so today we have a special episode for you to listen to. Members from an improv group called Improvised Star Trek have agreed to answer a few questions. Please enjoy.
All right, I think we are ready to start.
Did you pull up the questions?
I have the questions in front of me. First of all, I think we should all maybe take a quick moment to introduce ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Chris Rathjen. I play a number of roles, primarily Corbomite Hayes, First Officer of the USS Sisyphus, and I am an editor and producer for Improvised Star Trek.
I am Mary Kate Walthall. I play Dr. Zarlene Zonelson and also Ensign Operator.
My name is Julia Weiss, and I play Lieutenant Rita King and also Ensign Spot. Love that little kitty.
And we want to thank the Final Frontier podcast for asking us to talk about Improvised Star Trek today.
Yeah, because the only thing we love more than doing Improvised Star Trek is talking about Improvised Star Trek.
I also really like nachos.
So I have here a list of questions that Adam sent, and I'm going to share them with us, and
Cool.
we can just answer as we go.
Perfect.
Question 1. How did you first get into Star Trek?
I first got into Star Trek because a friend of mine, we were working at Groupon. Am I allowed to say that? We were working at Groupon, and basically, when I worked at Groupon in customer service, what that job entailed was watching Netflix and occasionally answering customer support emails. And my friend Christina Felsky was like, "Oh, I've been watching Star Trek. I really think you'd like it." And I was like, "I think I do like it." Because my dad and my brother would watch it, but I was not invited. And so then I watched all of the original series, and I would take a lot of screenshots and post them on the internet. And then Star Trek friends would be like, "So glad you're getting into this. You got to keep going and watch Next Generation." Then I got super into that. And now Star Trek is like my security blanket. I watch it when I'm sad or anxious or can't sleep or want to watch Star Trek.
Yeah. So funny. My story also involves someone named Christina. I watched Star Trek as a kid with my dad, and so we would watch it like the live broadcasts when they would come on, especially of Deep Space Nine, and then reruns of Next Generation. And I got the Next Gen action figures, and I loved when I would play dolls with my friend Christina Strapel. We would play with the Star Trek action figures, and she always wanted to be Deanna Troi, and I would be kind of jealous because Deanna Troi had 2 of the little dude action figures trying to get her. But I was like, I wanted to be a doctor, actually. So I was often Beverly Crusher, because apparently I didn't have the imagination to be one of the male characters.
I did not know that you would play as Beverly Crusher. That's wonderful.
I love that.
I also started watching it as a kid. I would watch I would see old episodes of the original series, and my dad would sometimes watch it, and I would watch it with him. But when the Next Gen rolled around is when I really kind of started watching it on my own. But because Next Gen was a great show, that is also a show that the whole family would also sometimes watch together. So I would never miss an episode, but it is a thing that my mom and my dad and my sister would join me in. So that was always very nice.
Yeah.
And I kept watching through Deep Space Nine, and then I sort of fell out of it when I went to college, and then I went back and caught up on the newer series when I started doing Improvised Star Trek.
Nice. Not having watched it as a kid, what's wild is that I knew all the characters as a kid. I don't know if it was just because I would catch it when it was on, I was somehow drawn to it. when I was in first grade, I broke my pinky finger. I slammed it in a car door on my first day. Nope, second grade. I'm so sorry. First day of second grade, slammed my pinky in a car door. And I was so happy because I could like do the like Vulcan, like which I later also learned it was actually from Judaism. So maybe that was just like ingrained in me as well. But yeah.
Well, this might lead into the next question. What's your favorite series or film?
Oh, that's hard.
I'll go first on this
Okay.
one. I think my favorite is just TNG, just because it's the one I grew up with. It's the one that like I soaked in. But I did start watching DS9 when it first came out before I fell out of the habit. And having gone back, it's like one of those ones where I look at that and it's like, oh, this is clearly like better television. This is like really good TV. So my nostalgic favorite is TNG, and my critical favorite is Deep Space Nine.
I think same. I think, yeah. The characters of TNG are the ones that I think of the most when I think of Star Trek, but then Deep Space Nine, like the arc, I think was really satisfying, really interesting.
I have a hard time with Deep Space Nine, as you know, because of Odo's face. And I'm ashamed of this. I have a very hard time watching it because of his face. And I feel bad about that, but I think I think that for me it really depends on like the mood I'm in, the emotional state, and like what I'm seeking from the trek. And I think that each trek offers something different for me, except for Enterprise, which offers nothing.
All right. Question 3. Have you been watching Discovery?
No.
I haven't, but it's just because I don't have any real TV.
Yeah.
I have been watching Discovery. I'm a few episodes behind, but I am enjoying the second season. I really liked the episode An Oboe for Charon. That's my favorite one of the series so far. So,
Cool.
How do you watch it if you don't have channels, like, or if you don't have like cable that lets you sign in?
we pay for CBS All Access in my house.
I gotta pay for another thing.
Uh-oh.
I know you can watch.
First...
I think you can still watch the pilot for the second season on Netflix. Sorry, on YouTube right now.
Oh.
Because I did watch the first 2 episodes, and I really like the guy who is Prey.
Oh yeah, Saru. Yeah,
Saru.
he's absolutely one of. Well, yeah, I think he might be my favorite part. He's one of those Star Trek aliens that is almost more empathetic than the humans.
Oh, cool. And that actor is is Shape of Water guy.
I still haven't seen Shape of Water.
And he's in a bunch of just other Guillermo del
I've only
Toro.
seen the sex scene from Shape of Water, which I did seek out.
Well, that's Doug Jones.
Yes, Doug Jones.
Yeah.
God, he's so good.
Yeah. I watched Hellboy yesterday when I was sick, and he's great in it.
Also have not seen Hellboy.
He's another fish man, although a more chaste one. All right. Oh, here's the big one. What is improvised Star Trek?
Whoa. Wow. That's a big question.
The simple answer is that it is a podcast, narrative series that takes place on its own ship with its own crew, journeying through space, seeking out new life and new civilizations, but getting into some wacky adventures along the way.
It's like answering that question, Star Trek, all of the television series seem to follow ships that are like at the top of the fleet. And it's like, what about all the other ships? What about the ships that are doing just okay, if not on the verge of being decommissioned?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and take a step back in case there's anyone who doesn't know at all. We are, so Improvised Star Trek started, everyone you're listening to right now is a Chicago improviser. And starting in 2009, we started doing a live Star Trek themed show at the I.O. Theater in Chicago. And after a pretty good run there, we decided to take it to a podcast by the logic that there are more fans of what we do than will necessarily come out to a midnight show at a theater in Chicago in the dead of winter. And we have been going 7 years now as a podcast. Our first podcast episode was in 2011, May 2011.
8 years almost.
Oh yeah, that is
Yeah,
that's
it's
almost
2019.
dang.
The last year on Earth.
But yeah, and so yeah, so we're all crew of the USS Sisyphus, and every week we get title suggestions from our listeners via Twitter or Facebook, and then we just improvise a complete 20 to 30 minute adventure based on that suggestion, playing with the tropes of Star Trek and other sci-fi, and really leaning into the recurring characters we have, because, you know, like a Star Trek show, it's got an ensemble cast. And yeah, and then we take the best of those that we improvise, and we edit them and put on sound effects and music cues and send them out into the world as episodes. And we're over 200 episodes of Improvised Star Trek now.
The longest running Star Trek series.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is the year we actually, so we do line up with continuity around the time of Next Gen and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And this was going to be the year where we became the furthest flung Star Trek series in the future, because this is the year that Nemesis happens. But then they announced the Picard show. So now we're going to have to do Improvised Star Trek another 20 years if we want to be the farthest Star Trek show in the future.
Yeah.
I've got no plans.
I do have a concern that, like, what if stuff that we improvise in our show, we got to, like, go back and retcon based on what happens in the new Picard show.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think we've done like a pretty good job of, I mean, our ship is not usually called into the big important fights.
True.
So during the period of time where the Dominion War was in theory happening, we would occasionally reference it. And, you know, when we talked about random ships attacking us, we switched to saying they were Jem'Hadar ships. But we actually didn't get too involved in the plots.
True.
Okay, so the question now is question 6. Mm-hmm. How did you get involved with Improvised Star Trek? I'll start because I was the first one to get in the loop. Griffin Eckstein was the Chicago improviser who wanted to put together this Star Trek themed show. And it was kind of to fill a midnight slot at the I.O. Theater, which is kind of a gamey creature feature kind of fun themed show often. And he was putting together group of funny improvisers who also knew their sci-fi, and I was on another non-themed team with him, and I corrected his chronology of the future when he made a Star Trek joke, and the next day I got invited to join Improvised Star Trek before it started. And then when we switched to a podcast, Nick Wagner was the cast member who kind of worked out how it would work as a podcast, and he and I had worked together in editing projects before. So I was also had a hand in figuring out how we would turn this into an audio product. So that happened. Yeah. And then we had the podcast run for a while, and then that actually got us invited back to do another run of live shows, which I think is when my part of the story gets handed off.
Well, I used to work downtown at Northwestern University for the medical school. And Joe Phillips, who was on the podcast, he was the ship's counselor, and he was also in the original live run. He played Jaffe. He also worked downtown, and there was like this downtown lunch group. And at one of those lunches, I think he mentioned he was on Improvised Star Trek, and I started talking about how much I loved Star Trek, and he was like, you should come and be a guest on the podcast. And that was right about when he was moving to Denver. He was like, they might be looking for new cast members. So I did a little guest on the podcast, and
You were a hungry antimatter cloud.
that's right. And then I was fully accepted into the fold as Dr. Zarlene Zonelson in my first episode as a cast member.
When I was first getting into Star Trek and I was posting all of these like screen grabs of episodes with like little comments, like people would be like, "Oh, are you familiar with Improvised Star Trek? You should check them out." And as my love of like I've long been like maybe too active on social media, and so my love of Star Trek was like very much out there. And being an improviser who loves Star Trek, I got invited to like do a guest spot on the show where I played the Romulan former lover of Captain Baxter. We have a son. I can't remember his name.
Duty.
That sounds right. And I remember being so nervous, but had a lot of fun. And then not too long after that, I got asked to join the cast. And in my first episode as a cast member, I played Lieutenant Rita King. And at the end of that episode, I think it was the first one, she got like turned into a pile of hoagies. But I then just was back and continued on. I don't know if we ever reconciled how she got de-hoagied.
I mean,
she's
something
still-
must have happened in the intervening weeks.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
maybe she's been a pile of hoagies this whole
The whole time.
and people just haven't called it out.
Honestly, the fact that she can like still get it as a pile of hoagies is truly goals to me.
All right, one more, and then I think we'll pause here real quick. But just the simple question: how long have you been a member of Improvised Star Trek? So being part of the original run, that was in 2009 at the I.O., so I have been doing this for a decade now.
Yeah, I think I've been doing it for 7 years. About.
I don't have a sense of time.
A little less than 7 years?
A little less, maybe 5, 6, maybe 5 or 6.
No, I
5.
think more than that, because
6.
there's that photo where I have the white hair, and I had that in like 2012, 2013.
You know what? And I
6
and
and
I went on my cruise ship in 2014. And that was a job. It wasn't a vacation. It sounded like I was just bragging about going on a cruise. But instead I'm bragging about having worked on one. But, oh gosh, so yeah. 7,
I think we're roughly
6,
the same
6
time.
and a half, 7. Yeah.
Question number 8: where do you perform?
Everywhere. No, I perform at the Annoyance Theater. I'm wondering if this question is like you as an improvised Star Trek, or
Well, let's do both. First,
Okay, great.
I'll
you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just first say, so Improvised Star Trek has at various points performed at various venues around the city. We started out at Improv Olympic. We have since done shows at, we've done shows all around the city of Chicago. We have toured a bit. I think most frequently now we play at the Cards Against Humanity's Theater, which is also the same building where we record our podcast. And our next scheduled performance is at C2E2. So if any of the listeners here will find themselves at C2E2, check the schedule. And we'll be doing a live performance of the podcast at the... Julia, is it called the Cards Against Humanity stage, or?
I can't remember what we're calling it. It might be like the Cards Against Humanity comedy place.
Great.
Or something like that. But I think that we have paid for big banners.
Oh, great. So if you're at C2E2, look up, and you'll see some instructions on where to see Improvised Star Trek perform.
There's lots of great comedy, live podcast recordings and panels in the room all day, all the days.
Yeah. So aside from special events like that, though, we don't have a regularly scheduled live performance anymore, but all of us perform around the city in other capacities. I perform at the IO Theater still regularly.
I perform at the Annoyance Theater on Tuesday nights with a group called Superhuman.
I'm a regular contributor to a show called Paper Machete, which is every Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Green Mill. If you want to go to that, go early because it has been starting to get real crowded. And I perform occasionally at the IO Theater as well.
Yeah. All right. Question 9. Do you each have a job that you do to prepare and perform on stage?
Like a ritual?
I think that's the question, yeah.
Not really anymore. I definitely, like, when I was first doing improv, I would often walk to the theater where I was performing because I deliberately lived close to IO, which is what a lot of people did at the time. And I would like walk there and have like, this is an embarrassing thing I've never admitted, that I would have like improv scenes in my head. And like, with the people on the team that I was going to play with. I guess I still sometimes have a little bit of that, but it wasn't really, and then I would just like be like, wow, I'm walking to do theater in Chicago. I've really made it. Mm-hmm. So that was the closest thing to like a pre-show ritual I ever had.
When we do live shows, we usually do like a little warm-up game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's called 3 Things. What do we do? 5 things?
It depends, but yes.
Yeah. So we give each other prompts. We'll be like, Chris, 5 things that Corbomite Hayes eats for dessert.
And then I'll come up with like Andorian flan and
1.
Yeah.
We say the number after each one.
We say the number after each one.
Yeah. So that's like a long-standing kind of improv warm-up, and I think through the years when we would do live performances, we would do different warm-ups, and somewhere along the way, we stumbled upon that one as a great way to kind of put ourselves in the mind state of our characters who, have their own backstory 360 years in the future, and to remind ourselves what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And then I think for me, before any improv show, the most important thing is just checking in with the other people that I'm going to perform with and seeing how people are doing and building relationships and trust so that we can just play.
Yeah.
It's always fun before shows to like have a conversation with the people that you're going to play with. And then like, it's interesting to see how those things like manifest on stage.
Yeah. Agree.
So I think that leads into the next question, question 10. How long does it take to prepare a performance/podcast, or do you truly improvise everything? And then there's a follow-up question, or do you have a general idea, story, outline that you're following?
Pure improv, baby.
Pure improv, baby. And then the raw episode of improvisation goes to our team of editors, and they grab one and take it and clean it up and put the sounds in. Chris can explain that in real words.
Yeah.
Well, before I do that, so the preparation of a podcast is just deciding which of the performances we have on recording that is our favorite that hasn't been produced yet. And if there's any stuff that didn't go anywhere, you might trim out like 2-3 minutes of a 25-minute performance. But mostly it's just kind of finding ways to reinforce what the performers were doing with setting background ambient noise and sound cues. Sometimes we'll be here in the recording studio and we'll say phaser, and in the recording we will swap those out with phaser sounds.
Yeah.
But in terms of the performance, The only thing we go in with is kind of the knowledge of our characters' backstory and who they are, which in and of itself is a little unique for improv shows. That's more than most improv shows have. But since we're trying to emulate the Star Trek model of an ensemble cast, we end up having backstory and personality traits that carry over and accumulate over time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we're talking about a different improv show that's not Improvised Star Trek, there's really no preparation of any of the material that's going to happen on stage. It is all in the moment. And then Improvised Star Trek, again, it's all in the moment. It's just that we're playing from a known context, which is the world of Star Trek and our characters.
Which is shockingly challenging. Like when before I was on Improvised Star Trek, Matt Young, who plays Captain Julius Valentine Baxter, was my improv coach, and as an experiment in our rehearsals, had us put together like a cast. The first one was Butch Dads, where our team was called Butch Max, and I think it was called Butch Dads. I can't remember like the name, but we were like, it was like a neighborhood of local parents. And we would have to like improvise within these characters that we established every week. And it was really hard for all of us. It was so hard. So it's like remarkably challenging to improvise from a place of like shared knowledge, but then you get used to it and it's fun.
Yeah. I think the most we would ever do in addition to that is sometimes if we are taking a suggestion that is a reference to an existing Star Trek episode, we might just take a quick second for everyone to remember the broad strokes of what that episode was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll be like, oh, that's the one where it was a Greek god, it captured the ship.
Or if it's like one that references like a specific like alien or something, and people could be like, wait, remind me of what they are like.
What's the deal with the breen?
Yeah. What's the deal with the breed?
And then when we have people guest on the show, we like to give them the option of like, what kind of character do you want to play? What character do you want to play? And so when they say that, usually it comes along with like, okay, so then they've said what kind of character they want to play. And then for me, at least, as soon as they said that, my mind just instantly starts trying to think of like, okay, why is this person, why are we coming into contact with this person? What's going on? How does this work?
Yeah.
But you can't plan anything because it wouldn't be improv, but also you can't be inside of everyone else's head. People are going to be contributing what they think as well. That
does make me think of like we have guests on who have all levels of Star Trek knowledge, and so if someone comes in and they have literally no knowledge, they're just like, I want to play a life coach type. Like that can fit into Star Trek. If you have an entirely different idea about how what sci-fi space physics work or how that works, that's just how your planet works, and we're the ones encountering your planet that week. And so we have to learn and follow your rules.
Yeah.
Number 11, do you have a favorite memory of Improvised Star Trek on stage or recording the podcast?
I have a hard time remembering improv in general. But I remember when Eli first did a live show, the first time he guest starred, I think I played his child, or like I was like an orphan or something. I go through phases where I just want to play like vulnerable children. And I die, and Eli, who
he was a godlike being,
he was a god, and he like scooped me up and like carried me off stage. And like generally, I still any girl who's ever been in middle school, like I think has this reaction to being picked up of like suddenly like tensing up and being terrified of like, what is this person going to think of my mass? And I had like a brief moment of that, and then just like felt fully free and safe in the arms of Eli Mandel, and it was so delightful. I love him.
If I can say, I do remember that episode, and that was another great one where it played out exactly like a real Star Trek episode. We were captured by a godlike being, and we had a B plot where there was a kid who was orphaned because his parents had been killed, and the end of the solution at the end was to put the two of them together and let the godlike being raise the child.
Oh, yeah. I didn't die.
I think he may have brought you back to life.
Yeah.
There are a few. I'm thinking about with the live show, when Dan Granada first had us using Wiimotes as phaser sound effects to have those on stage, and then also putting up iPod touches and iPhones backstage to have sound effect buttons that we could use backstage. Just that being such a revelation and so exciting, and him doing the live sound effects, I just being so thrilled at that. Then another one from recording was also those early days with Eli when he was like, he came on the show while I was gone in London, and then when I came back and there was that like fun sort of tension and game between Zarlene and Rip, just having so much fun playing that. And then also those episodes where things just come together, sort of like what you were mentioning, where it just like blows our own mind that things went that well, or we're having so much fun. Like I'm thinking of the Mind Prison inside of Mind Prisons episode.
When we find a game and everyone, it's like that electric improv thing where your minds really do, like, you know exactly what the game is and you can really predict like what, and everyone gets so excited about playing that same game. Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, that episode, like literally forever, that's one of the ones. Sometimes we're in a recording and, we're often very feeling good about what we're doing, but sometimes you realize you're pitching a perfect game. And just the excitement and like the slow tension that builds in the room where everyone starts to wonder, like, are we going to land this like absolutely perfectly? And occasionally we do, and it is so fun.
Another thing I like that I think of a lot when whenever we do a live show and we have like the credits, I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a little joke built into the credits that like every time the audience like gets so delighted and laughs at. And when the first time I got to do a live run at the old I.O. Theater, we're backstage, and so we can't like see it, but you know exactly where it hits, and you hear the audience laugh, and I just like remember the feeling of being so excited to get to do this show, and hearing the audience laugh at that always like give such a lovely like positive energy boost right before we go on stage. And every time we do the live show now, like I have that like really clear sense memory to that feeling of like just like excitement and gratitude for getting to do the show. And it reminds me of that feeling like all those years ago.
Yeah. Maybe we should go ahead and take a quick moment to explain a little about the live show experience, because I don't think we have. But as I said, it started as a live show, and then it became a podcast, and then we started doing runs of the live show again. And one of the things that I think has been great is that the podcast has informed how the live show works. So we've now got a producer by the name of Dan Granada who does the sort of work in the live show that we do for our podcasts. He handles all of like the ambient noise. He handles the sound effects live. And so we've got these effects that are happening, and it really, I think, adds a level of, it really gives the Trek feel to the live show.
Yeah.
Oh man. Also just thinking about how much fun Griffin Eckstein has in those live shows. I feel like of all of us is the one who's most likely to like put on a crazy costume and come out and do something real funky.
Yeah. Oh, I miss Lackey, and I miss like the relationship that like Rita and Lackey developed during the live run.
Oh. Cast members passed. We love
Yeah.
May his memory be a blessing. He's still alive.
He's still alive, but his memory is a blessing.
Question 12. Have you been a part of any other Star Trek productions, like a fan film or other podcast audio drama?
No.
Mary Kate, I know you're wrong because you have done the same one I have. We have both been in the Klingon Christmas Carol.
Oh, that's right. I lied. I totally lied. That's so right. I forgot about it.
So in the city of Chicago, I think it started in Minneapolis, but for many years, a live show of A Klingon Christmas Carol was performed here by a theater company called Comedy Beauregard? Theater Beauregard.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a complete translation of Dickens' A Christmas Carol into Klingon. And very smart marketing on their part. They had like a cameo slot that they would leave open so that they could have people in just to be part of the experience and to kind of help cross-promote. And the role is the spouse of Fezziwig. And I've been told it's important that the term is not gendered in Klingon, so it can be whoever. So it's basically in Dickens it's Mrs. Fezziwig, and in A Klingon Christmas Carol it is Fezziwig's beloved. And you have a one line you learn and you yell at Fezziwig's party, which in the Klingon version includes a lot of dueling. And so that was great to go. And we ended up working with them on various projects, obviously because they share some interests with us. But it was great to go and get in full Klingon makeup.
That was the best part, is the makeup and the costume. It was like, it's so cool to look in the mirror and have a Klingon forehead. I found it really difficult to learn the line in Klingon, though. I was like, oh, how do they do this?
Yeah.
It's very impressive what they do. Thank you for reminding me. I can't believe I forgot.
Where can people go to watch or listen to past performances and podcast? We are on all of the podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. We've got an RSS feed on our website.
Castbox, Player FM.
Yeah. If you go to our website, it's a very nice LCARS layout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, Dan Granata.
Yeah.
Dan Granata, multi-talented, also phenomenal actor.
Yes. If you get the chance to see him in a show in Chicago.
Truly a Dan of all trades.
Yes.
All right. The last question that you'll probably want to get in on before you have to go, Julia, is 14. Anything else you would like to discuss that is related to Star Trek and your group?
A thing that for me is why I fell in love with Star Trek is that, like, even in the original series, for how like problematic some of the stuff is, there's always like this value of showing a future that is better than the present in which the Star Trek is made, and the value of progress and making not only the world better but the universe. And I think that that's a value that's really important to all of us as people. And a lot of times, like, our conversations that we have, like, before recording or when we're out, like, having a beer or something after we've recorded, like, center around, like, the importance of making a better world. And I think that that's something that, like, we try to bring those values into, like, I don't even know if we necessarily try to. I think it just happens, like, innately. And that's something that, like, I really especially value.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really resonating with what you said. I'm thinking about how there are a lot of media and television shows where it's like, isn't it crazy and cool to watch this, like, violence, or watching people, like, basically, mess with each other, or what is it, like, being bad, so to speak. Or it's just, I really appreciate Star Trek as a show where one of the central dramas of the show is the personal, like, internal quest to live up to one's values of different characters, and the growth that comes through, like, meeting every situation with the intention to live up to your values. And it's not like, oh, it's perfect and these are perfect people, but it's like everybody continuing, like, even in the world of Star Trek, they're continuing to aspire to create something better than what they currently have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned while we've been doing this show over the years is, like, how actually broad base of support Star Trek had. And maybe it's because there wasn't, like, digital streaming back when TNG was out, but so many people, even people who don't, like, consider themselves sci-fi fans, ended up watching large chunks of stuff from that era. And it really is kind of a much broader cultural thing than you would guess just by looking at how focused marketing on new stuff is. It really has gotten like out there and into everyone's brains. I think to the culture's benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we have 3D printing, which is basically replicators.
Basically.
Yeah. Well, those were the ends of that was the end of the questions there.
That's it, guys.
Wanted to Adam and Bill, thank you very much for asking us to appear on your podcast, and thank you for letting us make our schedule these interview questions ourselves. It was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the questions themselves and the opportunity to talk about our show.
Yeah, an opportunity to like think about some of these things. It was really nice to like stroll through what we love and what we like, fond memories, and get thoughtful about what we do. That was a gift.
Yes.
So if anyone wants to check out Improvised Star Trek, we've got a website, www.theimprovisedstartrek.com. We're on all the podcast services. We've got over 200 episodes. And if you're at C2E2, we'll be there in the flesh.
See you there.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.
Thank you.